This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students, alumni, and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional career that you're happy with. In late 2022, I had the opportunity to speak with a number of Foster MBA graduates who are now on the other side of the interview table about what they're listening for from candidates in behavioral interviews. I talked to each one separately, but as you'll hear in this compilation of their answers, across industries and roles, there are some very clear trends: authenticity, enthusiasm, preparation. You'll hear from, in this order, Adam Schmidt at Accenture, Sam Eade at Google, Claire Herding at Walmart, and Skylar Brown at Goldman Sachs. Let's listen to what they had to say in this special episode of Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. First, I asked them what they're listening for when they ask a candidate the "tell me about yourself" question.
So I'm absolutely listening for preparation, right? This is a question that you know is coming, and you know it's going to be coming from every single interview that you do. So you need to have a thoughtful, prepared response. Beyond that, what I listen for is a sense of self, of self-understanding, that you know what you're passionate about, you know what your strengths are, you've identified things that you want to do or do differently in your future or in this new job or career. And then if you're giving an extended response, maybe you're talking about your story over a couple of minutes, I'm always interested in understanding the inflection points in your story. It can demonstrate a little bit of a sense of sort of your willingness to, be open, transparent, even vulnerable, and talk about what impacted you to become who you are today. So I'm really listening for like personal aspects that you bring to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, like any of these questions, they're always looking for the same characteristics, right? First and foremost, at Google, we think about everything in the world as revolving around people. You're a person, the people you're working with are people, the people you're working for are people you're working to serve are people. When I say people, humans, right? We have real needs. We're looking for a team player. Looking for someone that's thoughtful, that's out there to serve each other, work well together, solve problems together, right? And when you get one of these generic questions, it's really looking to see in your background if you have this in your character. Are you a team player by definition, or is it something that like you are, faking? And of course, as you start to listen to stories and answers, we get to notice patterns. And really, what we're looking for are patterns.
Besides hearing that the candidate knows their own story, which, they obviously should know really well backwards and forwards, right? But what we're looking for really is, can they make the interviewer see and understand the value of their past experiences? Not just list the experiences off, in order, but what are you bringing from each of those experiences? The other thing we're listening for too is like, what is the candidate passionate about? Like, how are these past experiences building to what they want to do in their future, and what excites them? Can they make that connection clear?
There's a human being answer and then an interviewer answer. And so on the human being level, it is, does this strike me as an authentic answer for the person who's giving it? And I found that that's usually a product of preparation. And if someone can sound authentic, it generally also means they've prepped, they're not rushed, et cetera, et cetera. So that always starts everything out well when the answer sounds authentic and not rushed. And then as an interviewer, so that's the human piece, is does it sound authentic? As an interviewer, I'm listening for an answer that probably has some connection to the job. So there's something about you that would lead to you doing a good job starting day one as an intern or full-time at Goldman. And people do varying levels of displaying that. I don't know what that could be, but there's usually at least one thing there.
Next, I asked what they're listening for when they ask a candidate why they want to work at this company or why they want to work at this role.
So I want to know that you've done your homework. There are lots of opportunities in consulting. There are lots of firms that you may be networking with or recruiting with. And while consulting is a single industry, the scope of work, the types of projects, the types of career paths can be very different. And so it's important that you've done your homework, in your research, in your networking, in your preparation, and that you have a personal reason for why consulting makes sense for you at this point in your career and at this point in your education, why you're prepared, what you want to get out of consulting, what consulting can do to accelerate the kind of impact you want to have in business or in the broader world. So again, it's about knowing who you are and why you're here. For why Accenture, I think, again, it's about preparation and homework. Demonstrate that you understand what makes Accenture different. Demonstrate that you've spent some time looking at, maybe the website, but more importantly, perhaps like an annual report, getting a sense of our thought leadership and what drives our firm in the marketplace. And then I want to understand who you have talked to at Accenture, and what you've learned from those conversations and what you've learned from the experiences that current Accenture consultants and leaders have shared with you.
Why this company and why this role are a little bit different for me, especially at Google. So, why this company? Google has a mission. We're on a mission. We're mission-driven people, and we're all very, very passionate, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking to see if you really fit in this environment. What's interesting about Google, unlike many other companies, is that we don't really have a company culture that's like enforced on the employees as much as it is you're coming in, you're going to influence and change our culture. And we want to make sure that you have the characteristics and the principles that exhibit our characteristics and principles, right? Being thoughtful, being mindful, being honest, doing the right thing, especially when there's the wrong incentives are set up, making sure you watch out, right, for like bad things, and then calling them out, right, and not being defensive, but rather like saying, hey, I made a mistake, let's go figure it out together and learn from it. Those are really what we're looking for. When we say why a product manager specifically, a product manager, unlike most other functions, it touches everything, influences everything. So the top three things we're looking for, number one, is a quick learner, right? You could be working on search one day and hardware Pixel phone the next day. You need to jump in the deep end and be able to learn very quickly what's going on, right? Number two, is somebody that can work with a broad set of people from all sorts of backgrounds. You will be leading and influencing hundreds, if not thousands, of people around you, and every person has their own personality and what they like and what they dislike, and you need to be flexible enough to bring them all together. And that's the last thing, is we're looking for leaders. A product manager, by definition, is a leader. And there's a huge difference between a leader and a manager. A leader is somebody that brings people together, right? Is a grounding force. It's a character that has enough charisma that can get people excited about things. And that's really what we're looking for in a product manager.
I'm looking for if they can kind of tie it back to the company's, pillars, values, mission statement, something along that, like how does it relate to the company? Not something generic like, oh, I want to work at Walmart because they're the Fortune 1 company. Like that's a boring answer. But we want to hear something a little bit more specific and talk about like what value you think you can bring to the company that shows like you've researched the company and why you might fit in. So like a Walmart example could be, 90% of the people in the US live within 10 miles of a Walmart. I'm super excited about the potential impact I could have on so many people's lives by doing, XYZ with Walmart.
For folks who have done the prep, and this applies to most companies, you understand that your interest in the company may not apply to all of the company's roles. So the specificity in the answer has to be much higher for why this role. I think this differs by role, but specifically in private wealth management, investment banking, these jobs that are very time intensive, your answer should sound like a reasonable one. So as an example, I have friends who work all over the Sound, the Pacific Northwest, and some of them really enjoy hiking with their families, through the week, during the weekend, right? And so if I were to hear, I really love finance, I love the macroeconomic markets, and this job's also going to let me build the time in my calendar to hike Monday through Saturday with my family, right? Like there's a mismatch between what I think the role will enable me to do and what the role will actually enable me to do. So to answer sort of the reverse of your question, I don't think we listen for a full matchup. We are more listening for a mismatch.
Here, they share what they're listening for in a good answer to a behavioral question and what sets a good answer apart from the rest.
So I think my theme is preparation. You absolutely need to be prepared and understand your stories. And part of being prepared is having a structure. So listening to, whether it's the STAR method or something else that helps you to articulate pretty succinctly, but also clearly the situation you were in, what you did about it, what you learned from it, the outcomes to the team or the company, and so forth. That's table stakes. But I'm also listening for passion and energy and interest. If you've put the time in to prepare these stories for networking and for interviewing, particularly, you should be excited to share these stories, and they should come off as stories that you've told many times. Bring me into the situation, make me feel like I was a part of that team or experience, so that I can really see you in the role, doing the work, and growing from it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to merge this question with the next question, which is what is the biggest mistake we see people doing all the time? And it's very simple. Again, it's talking about patterns. If you come in and you say, I was working on this project, I did all of this work, I launched this feature, I made $1 billion, I brought in 1 million users, you're pretty self-centered and not a good team player. If you come in and say, we did this work, we launched this feature, we made $1 billion, we brought in 1 million people, I'm not really sure what you did. You probably just rode the wave. What I'm looking for is somebody that can structure a narrative correctly in terms of telling me what was the opportunity, what did the team achieve, what was your contribution, and what would have happened had you not been there, or what wouldn't have happened had you not been there. And that last piece is the most important piece. And funny enough, that's actually how you're judged at Google. So when I go up for a performance review, my colleagues, my leaders, and my employees, my reports, will literally write this about me. Had Sam not been present, the following would have been different. And that's how we assess your impact on the organization, the products, the users, and ultimately on yourself and the team around you.
One of the core things that you'd be surprised by how many people like miss is like, did they answer the question and did they answer it clearly and tie it back? Like a lot of people will tell a very complicated story, which, has all kinds of impressive things they did, but they won't clearly tie it back and answer the question that was asked. I think that gets missed a lot. And the more clearly and succinctly you can answer that question with your story while making it clear, the things that you did, the better the answer comes across and the more memorable it is for us. Another key point for what makes like a good answer when I'm listening for behavioral interview questions is I want to hear about what you did, but also like how you thought through the solution you came to. We want to hear about how you think and how you consider, maybe other people involved in the conversation, how you bring in expertise you might not have, things like that. It's not just about the solution you got to, but it's also about how you got there.
We are in the client service business. So whether it's polished or not, we're always looking for candidates to be thoughtful in their answers and be holistic. So it's almost never a 1 or 2 sentence answer. There's always some sort of description of the environment. There's also some description of the thought process, and then there's a description of the, and I'm using air quotes here, answer. And because a lot of these questions are unknown to the candidate, they might not be as polished, but people taking the pregnant pause, people speaking clearly, people having, again, and I've said this quite a few times now, having an authentic answer to the question. You may read something on Google that doesn't feel right. And if you regurgitate something that doesn't feel right, that comes through to a human interviewer. So yeah, that's, taking a pause, having a thoughtful answer, describing the environment, describing the thought process, and then having a thoughtful answer come out of the back of that is what we're generally looking for.
Lastly, I asked what mistakes can tank a candidate's chances of advancing in the interview process.
Candidates who don't advance, particularly through like a first round interview, are likely not able to demonstrate why they are a strong fit for some aspect of what we're looking for, whether that's skill, whether that's fit for career. That goes back to the why consulting, right? If you don't have a great answer for why you want to be a consultant, then it's unlikely we'll bring you to a second round interview for a consulting position. And then cultural fit too. This is a really important one for us. We expect our MBA hires to be ready to become managers within a year or two of joining the firm. And what that means is you have to be able to manage, build rapport with the interviewer.
One big mistake really is not being clear about how your stories and your interviews tie to the questions you're being asked. Like STAR stories have that format for a reason. It helps make it very clear what your, what the situation was, the task was, your action, the result. It's very important to do that. And if you miss that, you can miss the opportunity to really clearly communicate what your answer is to the question. Not expressing your cultural fit as well, whether that's, either really, really clearly expressing that, like, hey, here's why I fit at this company because I know, you all at this company care about XYZ and I care about XYZ, or whether it's a more subtle approach, like, that the people at this company are very humble. So when you're telling your STAR stories, you want to make sure that you come across as humble and like you care about those things. You don't want to talk about, the opposite of that because you might that's going to wind up showing that you're not a cultural fit. So it's important to know the company's culture and be able to like talk that way when you're interviewing. Sometimes it's like when someone's reaching too much to make a story fit the question. I know we've all been there where we, are asked a question, we're like, shoot, like internally, I don't have the perfect story for that. But if you try to make something reach too far, it's really obvious that you're reaching. Me personally, as an interviewer, I'd rather you be honest so I can hear your reaction and how you react to this kind of hard situation of not maybe having the perfect experience for it. So I'd rather you be honest and say something like, hey, I don't quite have an experience like that, but here's what I would do, or here's a thing I did that I think was similar, and here's how I would take that knowledge and apply it to this situation that you've asked me about. That tells me that if you don't know how to do something, you'd be open about that and would ask for help when you need it.
Yeah, so I'll take this in two ways. I think there are planning mistakes, and then what we would call sort of in the game mistakes.
Execution.
So things that happen in the interview, how you execute, minute to minute. I think the planning mistake that some students make is the net's just too wide. And so, when you consider it may take you 2, 3, 5, 10 hours to prep for an interview, if you have 150 of those as your plan, right? I understand life happens. We may have a lot of interviews, but if you haven't really honed down the 4, 5, or 10 opportunities that you are actually interested in, then that authenticity piece that I've been mentioning starts to break down. And so it becomes harder to even appear authentic because you haven't gotten the chance to dive deep enough to understand whether or not you really like the opportunity, or you can click down to the number of degrees that an interviewer would ask. So on the planning side, I would say not planning to have enough time to know enough about the role to truly be interested in the role is the first fatal mistake, in my opinion. And then moving forward, it is, once you know where you want to go, have I met at least one person who's in the role or role adjacent that I could connect with and sort of build that common language, that common operating language, so that I can use that language during the interview. And then from there, it's planning to prep, just as Foster does an incredible job, helping students do. Then in the interview, if you've prepped, then it's all a matter of authenticity and whether or not you're being who you are. I think Foster does a great job of this, and the research is very clear in that if you prep with Google and you take someone else's word for everything that you should be saying, then you cannot maximize your own ability to connect with someone, to build rapport with someone, to have those unconventional answers that are novel and unique. So I think most of the terminal mistakes are actually on the planning side rather than in the interview, because if you plan correctly, it's just much easier to do that 45 minutes or 5 hours on a super day.
Again, we heard from Foster alums Adam Schmidt, Sam Eade, Claire Herding, and Skylar Brown. Thank you for listening to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or classmate. Help others find the show by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Conversations on Careers and Professional Life is produced by me, Gregory Heller, with support from the Foster School of Business, Office of MBA Career Management. Learn more about the show, find show notes and past episodes, and get in touch with me at conversationsoncareers.com.